The things that you have in your heart that you think are impossible are often just milestones waiting to get accomplished if you can push those limits. Everything was impossible until somebody else did it. So you can either hang around people that tell you it can be done, or hang around those that inspire possibilities. Welcome to the Inspiring Possibilities Podcast. Weekly interviews with entrepreneurs, artists, those that inspire possibilities. And I'm your host, Julian Marion. All right, welcome to the Inspiring Possibility Podcast. I have an amazing guest today. I've been waiting for this interview for a couple minutes. I'm very excited. From the first time I met her, I was like, you know what? I want her to be on the podcast. I'm not going to tell her. So I'm just going to go and I'm just going to visualize it. And then we're going to have this conversation one day. I know it. And here she is. So the beautiful Arletta Allen. Arletta, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm just as excited as you, if not more. So thank you so much for extending the invitation.
Awesome. So you, like we're talking pre-show, you've lived many lives. I think for most people, if they truly know your story, they would be just in awe of like how you've gone. I used to always talk about, I always talk about this concept of you have to die to be reborn. You have to die to be reborn in order for you to evolve in life. And I think out of the majority of people that I know in my life, you've gone to the most death and rebirth cycles.
Yes,
anybody I know. So for people listening that don't know you yet, right? Like just give them a little summary, like who is Arletta Allen?
Well, Arletta Allen is a self-made woman. She is a woman who absolutely loves people. I love to love on people. I love to meet people where they are. I love to see people. I love to allow for people to have their voices be amplified and for them to be seen and heard when they come into a conversation with me. For me, it's very important because I lack that. I lack that coming up. So what I like to do is I like to gift people the things that I didn't have. And so growing up as a young girl in Yazoo City, Mississippi, we were very poverty stricken and I came from a very dysfunctional background. One where every single day my dad was like beating the brakes off my mother right there in front of us. And when he got tired of beating on her, he would reach for us and he would do terribly painful things. And those things really still didn't stop me as I got a little bit older going into my teenage years, wanting the validation and wanting to be seen and heard by my father. I wanted him so badly to tell me who I was. I know what I dreamed about. I know the thoughts that would run through my mind about, every little girl looking up and saying, I want to be a princess when I grow up, or I want to be a doctor when I grow up, or I knew that somehow, some way, I wanted to change the world when I grew up. Even as a little girl, I saw myself on a stage in lights. I saw myself being impactful. I didn't exactly know what it meant, but I saw it before I saw it. And so I have basically made my way through those transitions. And the reason for many of the pitfalls that I took was because of me still searching for validation, the same validation I didn't get from my father. And that in particular, that traumatic experience in my life basically shaped and defined me becoming an overachiever. And listen, when I tell you, I hate to admit that. I hate to admit that. But it took for me to really do some critical thinking and look back at the decisions that I made that landed me here now where I am today. And I saw this sense of the fact that I just wanted I wanted to achieve something that would have someone else say, good job, Arletta. You are accepted, Arletta. You are loved, you are seen, you are heard, Arletta. And because of my the area that I grew up with, which was predominantly white people, in a community that had about 90% of the population was white, and only about less than 2% of the population was Black people of color. And it was a struggle for me to not try to conform to what the people around me wanted me to be versus who I really was. And so that was a struggle for many, 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 many years. My entirety of my youth, from ages 9 clear on through up until my young adult years, I spent in normative conformity, living in the shadows of what everybody else wanted me to be versus stepping into my true authenticity. And so that's why the many lives of the many rebirths, because I wasn't certain of who I was, because I had spent the majority of my life wanting my dad to tell me who I was. And when that didn't happen, I went on a dead end search that caused a lot of pain, caused a lot of setbacks, and caused me to be dishonored even more. And I had to learn those lessons, take those hits. And then at some point, I had to make the transition into believing in myself in order to get up from where I was and believe that life was worth living from that point on. So that's why you have me here today. That's why I work in the area of trauma recovery. That is why I am an authenticity expert. That is why I speak from stages in women's empowerment, because I absolutely want to see people's lives changed and a difference made, because I didn't have that.
So many questions. so many questions, right? First, I started writing, the the journey. So like you, I'm an achiever, right? And so I know a lot about that kind of archetype of the achiever, right? Which is it's a dangerous one, right, to say the least, because it's one that puts worth instead of achievement, right?
Yes.
Not instead of just like self-worth of who you are, but it's like, what have you actually done, right? And that's why the degrees, the books, the diplomas, the certifications, the positions, the right to have that sense of I need to achieve, which the flip side of that is when I don't achieve, right? that side, right?
The fallout
That
of
is
it.
right. It's amazing because we achieve, but then it's like when we don't achieve, like that person, right? The one is just like, just leave me alone for a little bit until I achieve something, then I'll be back from my cave and I'll be ready, and
us
so
being our worst critic, us being the
right.
one that beats ourselves up the most when that doesn't happen. Because once again, if you're an overachiever and you're constantly trying to seek validation from the things that you do and not the person that you are, it's displaced validation.
Right.
And so it can never, it can't sustain you. And so you'll always be feeling this empty funnel that never, it leads to nowhere. It hits the ground and you may have a paper certificate, a document, a degree, a position, but it's not fulfilling.
Right. No, and that just like you, like it's taken me years to understand that, right? To be able to understand, like, hey, this is kind of like who you are currently. This is the good, this is the bad. How do we now bridge, right? So that we don't have the peaks and valley, right? So we don't have the peaks and valley there. And I have obviously an amazing wife that kind of coached me through it too, right? Because she's amazing at being able to kind of see those gaps and and help. So I love it. So we talk about Mississippi. I've lived in, believe it or not, I lived in Mississippi. I lived in Jackson. I went to college
Really?
there.
That's
So
only 30
yeah,
miles
four
away
years.
from my home.
There
Oh,
we go.
wow.
Jackson, Jackson, Mississippi, 4 years. So I know a little bit about Mississippi. So you went from Mississippi to where? What is the journey? Mississippi, and then we go where?
Fond du Lac, Wisconsin.
To Wisconsin. Man, oh
Yes.
man. This
Drastic,
is
right?
this is almost like north and south of Mississippi. It's almost as drastic.
Yeah, it's
As the
craziness, right?
difference. Yes,
My
it
mother
really is.
was
Okay,
running
so
for her life.
that is crazy. So that is definitely far.
Yeah.
Far, very far from Mississippi. So you go to Mississippi. Tell me that journey in Mississippi, because I know you got some pretty amazing things, in Mississippi. I mean, sorry, in Wisconsin. So tell me kind of like that journey in Wisconsin and kind of like that evolution there.
Well, we can begin with why we left Yazoo City, Mississippi.
Yeah.
My mother was the woman who was being brutally beaten. And also us children. My dad suffered from PTSD from his service in the military before it became a term or before it became a thing. And so before they termed it and made it something that could be diagnosed, my father was already struggling with that. And so my father would actually come and he would get stuck in a mindset mentally, and he would have us perform his practices from boot camp. He would have us take like cans and things from like heavy, big old cans from the cabinet and hold them with our arms stretched out, and we'd have to keep our back straight. And I'm talking about for hours until he got tired of looking at us. He was extremely, extremely abusive, extremely abusive. My mother wouldn't have to do or say anything wrong. He would just break into a room after being gone, creating another family across town. He would just break into the house and just punch my mom in the mouth for no reason. He would show up after being gone for weeks on end, and we would almost have a small level of peace in the home because he wasn't there. We didn't have much of anything. My mother was like a magician when it came to making a whole lot of something out of nothing. We were so terribly poverty stricken. My mother made our clothes from bed sheets, and we walked dirt streets. And my mother is this phenomenal cook, but it came from her knowing how to take little ingredients and make amazing, amazing meals. And so us leaving Yazoo City, Mississippi was my mother's attempt at a life for us. She knew that if she stayed, that not only would she die there, but the likelihood was that we would die too, because my father was just that unstable. You know, he would literally beat us until we couldn't sit for days, and we'd have to be out of school because that's how bad our wounds were. And it was always that notion, what goes on in this house stays in this house. So it's not like I could go to school and tell a teacher or tell a confidant or tell somebody that I felt like I trusted that my dad was hurting us really, really bad, or hurting mom really, really bad. There was nowhere to turn because those teachers would report back to the parental household, and my dad would get wind of it. And my God, the fallout behind that would be, I tear up when I think about it. So my mother decided on a whim. My uncle lived in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and he called her out of nowhere and said that his friend Sammy was coming to Mississippi because he was originally from Louise, Mississippi. He was going to be coming to Mississippi, like basically just driving through and coming back to Wisconsin. And so he told my mom, you got 3 days. If you really want to leave, you got 3 days to figure out what you're going to do. Because you can always ride back with him, pack up the kids and ride back with him. And so that's what my mama did. I came home one day from school and there was a sign outside and it says, everything must go. I'll never forget seeing that sign, but I also remember the stairwell the sign was attached to, that my dad would oftentimes drag my mother down in front of the public, beating her and hurting her. And so when I saw that sign, I knew that change was coming, and it was change that I couldn't do anything about. Although I loved Mississippi for so many other reasons, wherever my mother was is where I wanted to be because she was my safety. She was the one who risked it all for us. And so she sold everything in less than 3 days, took what money she could, and whatever she didn't sell, she left in that house. And we hit it. We came all the way to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, but then we met an animal of a whole different color when we got to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, because now we come from a place where we were once the majority, and now we're the minority. And that's a different type of animal that I had no clue about. I'm used to, seeing white people and Black people, be able to come together and maybe sprinkle in a white person every now and again. But it was mostly people that looked like me. And so I was comfortable there. And I felt like my mom thrust us into this environment where we weren't wanted, seen, or heard. People just made it clear, you're like a foreign thing, not even a person, a foreign thing, and we don't want you here. And so now I had to deal with the pain of people seeing the exterior of me and basically not even hearing my voice and judging me and not wanting me around. So rejection was the next big animal that I had to face off with. And I went through a series of events as I continued to grow up. We ended up homeless in the first 6 months after our move to Fond du Lac. And we ended up in a homeless shelter. So it was just unfortunate event after unfortunate event.
Hey, it's Julian here, and I wanted to take a quick little pause. Arletta has an event coming in next week, and I wanted to have her tell you about and invite you guys. It's a Zoom event, so here we go. Arletta, take it over.
Defy the odds and break the silence. This is a sexual assault awareness event that's taking place Saturday, April 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. entirely online. This event aims to help women and girls defy the odds in their lives by breaking the silence surrounding sexual assault and encouraging survivors to speak out and seek support. My name is Arletta Allen, and I'm hosting the event, and I can't wait to see you in the building. Don't forget to grab your tickets. They're going fast.
Yeah, so whenever so you guys moved to Wisconsin, and it's kind of like now it's a new journey, right? New adventure, right? You have to figure out now this whole new environment, right? I mean, I haven't personally experienced that environment often, right? Being, you heard my story, right? Being mixed,
Yes.
my Black friends tell me I'm white, my white friends tell me I'm Black, and so like wherever I went, I've always felt like a minority anyway. Right. So I totally understand that feeling, or feel like you're there just like, wow, like I'm literally, I literally don't have a quote unquote group, right? I'm just
the fly in the buttermilk is what I call myself.
Yeah. Say it again.
The fly in the buttermilk is what I call myself. That little black speck in a pool of white.
Yes. Funny, not funny. Sorry. Just, my humor. So we get to Wisconsin, okay? So tell me how you go from that moment, okay, where we're there and we're just trying to figure out how to navigate this new world, to just like I guess we can call it like your rise to now kind of like on the political scene. Like how did that, happen? Because that's, pretty drastic. To say the least.
Well, see, I came to Wisconsin when I was only 10 years old. And so I lived a good 31 years in that environment, that community that I spoke about. And so I learned all of my mannerisms. I learned my environmental responses. I was socially accepted in a space that isn't necessarily common. And so going from the school system and learning how to navigate that space from normative conformity. And when I say normative conformity, I'm basically just saying when a person is willing to bend who they are and what they are in order to fit the confines of someone else's idea for a sense of belonging. And so I would be in the cafeteria and I would get ostracized and treated like I was a plague. Like I had cooties, if you will. I was treated like something was wrong with me. And it was only because of the color of my skin. People didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know people of color. And so they were afraid of what they didn't know. And so I developed this, let me figure out how to be more like them. Right. And then maybe, just maybe, I'll be accepted. And so I went through a number of years with that thought and that idea. Let me figure out how to fit in. Let me figure out how to create the sense of belonging. So I adapted friends that didn't look like me. And I started to have sleepovers and show up at their parents' houses and at their family gatherings and stuff. And I learned the climate, I learned the environment, and I learned how to get along in spaces that weren't necessarily created for me. I found a lot of love in those spaces, though. And I want to highlight that because I think another misinformed thing that's actually circulating our country right now is the racism portion of it. People want to only see one side of the story. They only want to see, this set of people in this light and this set of people in this light, when there's always different variations to every single ethnic background, no matter where you come from, no matter what culture, it's always variations, right? And so I wasn't a white girl, but I was accepted by white people and loved on like by white people and treated like I was a part of their family. Even my close friend, she was Korean and her parents were white because she was adopted. And she was my best friend. So we would go to her house and her parents were white and she was Korean and I was black. And we would have dinner together, you know. So I thrived on love. I thrived on wanting to not have other people feel the way that I felt. Right. And so the transition between coming into Wisconsin, growing up and going through the school system, growing up and going into high school and deciding what was going to be next, I had a pit stop. I went through a phase of prostitution. I went through a phase of teen pregnancy. I went through a phase of a couple of really bad relationships, all mirroring my father. I went through a couple major setbacks before I decided that triumphing over my trauma was going to be the next best thing for me to do. In order for me to do that, I had to choose me. And so me choosing me was my desire to want to help others not feel the things and the places where I lacked, the places where I hurt. So one thing that I noticed in the city of Fond du Lac was the fact that people of color were often talked about, but we never had a voice at the table. We were often offered remedies for what they felt would be the best way to approach the needs in the community from a diverse standpoint, but they never asked Black people what it is that they need. They never asked Black people what the culture existed, what existed in the culture, and how they could better serve as a community overall. So I thrived in that space and wanted to bring our perspective to the table. I knew that if I didn't make my voice heard and get a seat at the table, then that was just like us being underrepresented and us not having a voice. And when I say us, I mean Black people. And so my trip to politics was basically it was not basic because there was nothing basic about it, but my trip into the seat of councilwoman was because I wanted our voices to be heard. I wanted us to have a seat at the table and to discuss the things that were important in the community so that we could create that more inclusive and diverse, welcoming community for all cultures.
That's beautiful. So what, for those that don't know the political side, what does a councilwoman does?
Oh, we look at like policies in the community, different types of community expansion projects, connecting business sides or large organizations to the actual community, thinking of ways to enhance the overall experience of the community, whether it's building parks, whether it's bringing restaurants, whether it's cultivating the open area greenery and agriculture in the community. We make decisions budget-wise, the bus systems, biking, public forums, public policy. We make all the decisions on those things, and we take the actual budget that's set aside for the community, and we vote on what moves forward and what gets tabled, what gets thrown out, and what actually makes a cut when it comes to the entire community itself. A board of council people, if you will, because it's a mixture of men and women, we would come together and vote, and there would be 7 of us total, and we would vote on any given community issue. For instance, an example would be when we were getting ready to build a multi-million-dollar amphitheater out in our Lakeside Park, which was huge controversy for the entire community because you had the older population that didn't want you to touch the greenery, and they're like, don't bring that crap to our town. And then you had the younger people that are like, give us something to do. We're bored as heck here. This is like a retirement community. So we were caught in the middle, and it was the most controversial subject ever. And it was all because some people wanted and desired change to move ahead, and other people wanted things to stay exactly the way that they were. So we made tough decisions, and we were ridiculed. You know, we were like the mayors of the city, only we were a council of 7.
You're the mayor, but not the mayor.
Right, because we didn't have a mayor. If we had a mayor, it would have been 1, but we didn't have a mayor. We had a council members govern the city.
That's pretty awesome to have actually, like, you know, just more of a group.
Mhm.
because you do have a lot of different viewpoints inside of that. So we go from there, Wisconsin, we go to kind of like this councilwoman, right? Which is a pretty amazing achievement. And then what happened? How do we transition from here?
Well, in the midst of councilwoman, if we zippity doo dah just back maybe a couple years before becoming councilwoman, I was struggling with education. So I ended up dropping out of school after becoming a teen mom. I dropped out
Mhm.
of high school to care for my infant son. And throughout that process, I worked two jobs. I was a single mom. I was abandoned by the person that got me pregnant. And I actually ended up later on down the line, like a couple years later, I ended up marrying him. And we
Mm.
had three more children. And so I have a total of four sons. And throughout that process, the babies kept coming, but I had a desire to further my education. Now, education was not something that was talked about or even heralded in our family because we came from dirt. We came from, not having anything. So education
Right.
wasn't a discussion. No one had ever gone to college in my entire family. No one had ever owned a home in my entire family. We were always, somehow, struggling. And so I made it my goal to create a different narrative for my sons. I wanted my sons to not know what poverty felt like. I wanted my sons to know of what the possibility of education could do for them. I wanted my sons to experience life on a different level than what I did. And so I modeled for my children the future that was possible for them. And so for me, that came through education. That came through me going to school all day in college and then working at night, two separate jobs to provide for my children at the same time. My husband at the time was in and out of jail, heavy alcoholic. I had some just ugly things happening, dealing with that, and then trying to
Right.
raise my children and trying to complete my education. But believe it or not, I'm a beast in these streets, and I did just that. I completed my education, and not only did I finish my education, but I graduated summa cum laude and top of my class as a communications expert and speaker. And so after graduating from college, that is when I was told by one of my instructors.
Mhm.
Well, when I walked into his classroom, he told me, he said, geez, he said, you got stardust coming out your ass, kid. That's what he said to me. It's like, what? He said,
Hold on,
stardust.
what?
He said, stardust coming out your ass,
You
kid.
you unicorn.
Yeah. He said, there's something different about you. He says, and kid, he said, you're going to change the world someday. And you know how sometimes when somebody speaks something to you and you don't have enough belief in you to believe what they
Right,
said, I
right.
borrowed his belief in that moment. So when he said it, I took on his belief about me and I ran with it and I never looked back. And so from that moment on, I began to pursue a career as a speaker. The next classes that I took at the 4-year accredited college that I went on to, it was all around communication, all around speaking, all around, sharing my story of impact. And so that's how I came to be in the speaker arena and transitioned from, while I was being council person, a spokesperson for the people, it was
Mhm,
all
mhm.
within my wheelhouse. It was something I was good at.
That's awesome. And I know there's more there because I know your story, a little bit
Mhm.
more than the listeners. But I know we don't have, that's probably gonna be on another episode. Kind of this
Mhm.
those other chapters, let's call them like that, right? Those other chapters. So if I have to kind of ask you, like, what do you feel is the two questions, right? The first one is, why do somebody goes back to someone that hurt them? Like, why do you feel like somebody does that? Is it unconscious, or is it because I know it's a known environment, therefore I feel safe in a known environment, although it's an environment that hurts me? But like, why do you feel there's kind of like that decision that happens?
Well, I'll tell you from my experience. I'll tell you exactly why you
Officer, of
do
course.
that. Because there's broken spaces that haven't been
Mm,
addressed. There's spaces in you, and subconsciously, you choose your partners and you go looking for people that match energy without even consciously knowing that that's a choice that you make. I was looking for partners that were just like my broken father because I still felt that I needed validation from him. And so I kept reverting back to what broke me. I kept looking for people who would fill that void, but they had to have the same attributes of my father in order for me to connect to them. And so we can say that people, you know he's not good for you. Why would you keep going back to a person that keeps breaking you and keeps hurting you?
Right.
Because there's still that hole on the inside that's unfulfilled. There's still that traumatic space that you have not healed in. And so that toxic relationship or that toxic person fills that void. It may not be with what you need, but you're willing to drink the poison, all to feel like you're feeling that empty space. And so I was willing to settle for a piece of a relationship just to say I had somebody, so I wouldn't have to watch somebody else walk away, just like my father did over and over again. I was willing to take the abuse because I was looking in the face of somebody who said, like my father said, that he loved me, but his actions didn't align. So what I do, I found somebody who portrayed the same attributes as my father. And the truth is that I just really need to tap into loving Arletta. I needed to tap into knowing who she was fully before I could begin to even think about getting into a relationship with somebody else. There were some broken places that I needed healing in before I needed to be considering connecting with somebody else. And now we two broken people coming together trying to make a whole object when we should have been coming into the relationship, both of us already complete and forming one.
So I guess that kind of goes to my next question, right? And I think you kind of answered it, in there, which was like, how does somebody heal to be able to be full and and get into more of a healthy relationship, right? Because now they're healed and they're whole. So like how do they kind of heal?
Well, the person has to defy the odds. And I talk about that all the time. That is like my concept. That is the thing that I have developed. Defy the odds simply means to do something that someone else thought was impossible for you to accomplish. You yourself thinking it's impossible for you to be able to move on from something that is hurting you, something that is toxic, something that you know is not good for you, requires for you to believe in yourself. It requires for you to forgive yourself. It requires for you to choose a different type of mindset, how you see yourself. It requires for you to learn how to celebrate yourself. It requires for you to do some internal work that's all around self. And no, it's not selfish when you've never put the attention where it belongs. You've got to defy the odds by stepping into your own purpose, finding your why, finding why you're living, why you're breathing, what's your purpose in life, and how can you expand that? How can you blow that up where it not only impacts you, but it impacts those that are around you? Because believe it or not, my decisions and the partners that I chose affected my children. The type of household I was in and the toxic connections that I had to their father and my former husbands, those affected my children, even right now today. My sons see themselves in a different light because they saw how I was being handled by men who said they loved me. And it took for my own children to tell me, Mom, you deserve better than that. Why do you keep settling? Why don't you see yourself the way that I had to break myself down to dust and be honest with me and say, hey, healing is now, unless you want to continue to drink poison. You want to continue to go through. Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I refuse to settle for what I've always gotten. And so I made a change. And that's the only requirement. It's a made up mind. Do it. Just do it.
Love it. So what do you feel like it's a kind of like in this journey? Because I think a lot of people know the decision that is required, right, to make the change, but are not willing to go through that death and rebirth, right? They're just not willing to go through it because it feels painful, and it is it is painful, right? But the rebirth is beautiful, right? But that death is can be long and can be painful, but the rebirth is beautiful. So what do you think is a kind of like a character or trait that just allow you to be you and to be able to go through so many evolution, in your life?
I believe that that would definitely be my authenticity. Beyond my authenticity, I would say my transparency and my willingness to be vulnerable, my willingness not to hide my pitfalls, the things that took me to the ground, or even how long I stayed on the ground before I made the actual choice to get up. I don't allow for those things to define me. I choose to show up as myself. And I learned to love Arletta. I learned to love her, even in her broken places, and accept the whole of me and not bits and pieces of me, because there were some ugly things there that I needed to fix. There were some beautiful things about me that I needed to keep and I needed to amplify. And it only was through my own self-worth and self-love journey that I was able to actually narrow down those things. You got to be willing to bet on you. You got to be willing to see what that other side, dream of the possibilities of what the other side could look like. I'll put it this way. In economics, when I was in college, I took this class called, that was Economics 101, and we talked about opportunity costs. And the total thought behind that is that when you don't choose one way, you're actually choosing something else by default. So when you are choosing to not heal and not do your self-discovery, you're actually choosing the latter. You're choosing to stay stuck. You're choosing to stay within the poison. You're choosing not to advance. You're choosing not to evolve. You're choosing to stay stuck right there in the situation that you loathe so much. And so it just boils down to the choices you make. Whatever you decide, the most important thing you can decide to do is to be honest with you and stop trying to be somebody else. Take your journey for what your journey is and love every bit of it. Wounds, scars, flaws, and all. And go ahead and evolve.
That's beautiful. I was going to ask you a parting piece of guidance, but you already gave it to us. So, so how can people, if people want to kind of like learn more about you, or just want to, to follow you because they, a mentor of mine said, your sheep will know your voice, right? Which is kind of like some, biblical kind of messaging. Pretty much what it means is like, that people that connects with your vibration, the vibration of your voice and your energy, like you and I connected the first time we met because we kind of have that same vibration, right? That's what they say, real recognize real, or vibration recognize vibration, right? You don't know what it is, but you just feel like, man, I'll just connect with this person, right? Like our energy match, right? Our heart match. And maybe also because when you no longer hide, right, you can see who is. Where you are authentically you can see who is not, and you can see who is. And therefore, it's like you can look at a room, you can already tell, nope, yep. Right? It just feels different, right? It just
That's
feels
so
different.
true.
And you know who, right? Because now I'm sure you go in and you're like, oh, I can tell who is making it up. I'm gonna be polite, but I already know who's making it up. This is not who they are. They're playing a game.
That part.
And you're like, I just don't need to be in that space because I do not connect with that anymore. Right. So people connecting with you, how can they get how can they in contact with you? Like, give me any information you have.
Every social platform there is at Arletta Allen Inspires. They
Tell
are
them
all
again.
titled the same.
Every
single platform. Arletta Allen Inspires on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, you name it. All of it's Arletta Allen Inspires. My website, www.arlettaallen.com. You can go on Amazon and find my book, Defy the Odds. If you really want to know my whole journey, and much more to what we talked about today, I go in depth and I share the entirety of it in my story because I like to connect to people who are ready to heal. I like to connect to people who know they come from something that was tumultuous and something that was painful, but they're now finally ready to step into their healing process. So I help people transition from their trauma to their triumph. And that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Each and every message that I give is motivational, it's inspirational, and it's life-giving. And that's what I thrive off of. I thrive off of knowing that someone else is healed because of the pain that I endured.
That's beautiful. And I think that's That's Ted say like a message worth sharing, but that's definitely a life worth living, right?
Yeah.
One that is like of service, but kind of share that testimony, because a lot of people are kind of those places where they don't fully know the direction or don't feel like
Yeah.
it's possible. That's what the
Mhm.
whole message of the podcast is, right? It's like inspiring possibilities, because if you can
That's right.
just believe that it's just possible, not that you know, but it's just possible that it could maybe happen, then you're just like one step closer to actually getting into what God called you to be. So,
Yes.
Arletta, thank you so much, for being with us. I'm sure
Julian, thank you so much for having me here.